what is on the horizon for the electrical safety industry. And I think you and I were, by the way, there are things that you can do in this industry that will give you that insight. And I will throw a plug in right now for the IEEE, the IAS Division's Electrical Safety Workshop. It's annual. It's a week-long event. And I know, Jarod, you were there for the first time to the one in Jacksonville this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible what we learned. And I know Jarod and I were sitting there taking notes, and we're like looking at each other like, did he just say that? Did he just say that? And we're like, that's incredible. So we can talk about some of the things that are on the horizon, and I'll let you get started.
You know, when it is on the horizon, that's a good question, because one of the things we talked about is even just the recent OSHA guidance that came down on electrical safety last November.
Yes.
That hasn't been done in over 20 years. And what was great to see is that I think that literally just brought a little more awareness to different nuggets or different pieces of electrical safety. For
Right.
instance, that document was what? 4 documents, one 15-pager for employers,
Right.
3 1 to 2 pagers for employee training type of material. And one of the things we saw twice in there was approach boundaries. Little animated pictures talking about
Yeah.
approach boundaries. Why do you think they brought approach boundaries into that?
Right.
And we can go off on that on different topics, but the point of what I was trying to make is just the overall awareness. There's a reason why OSHA did that,
Right.
and I think there's a lot coming in the marketplace with the electrification of the U.S.
Right.
You're talking solar, you're talking EVs, you're talking data centers, you're talking things that require a lot of energy, and so awareness is first and foremost on the horizon.
You touch on a topic that's kind of interesting to me because OSHA has been in the conversation for a long time. I mean, typically speaking, people say, what does OSHA say? And one of my complaints about OSHA has been that a lot of times they use vocabulary that doesn't fit what our everyday workers use.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, it was hard to find any information if you just did a word search on OSHA for arc flash, because they used weird terminology like electrical worker exposed to current, conductor explode. They didn't even use exploding, using a great deal. There was very unique wording they used, and I kept saying that is an arc flash. So when that came out in November, one of the first things I noticed is right there in the title, arc flash. They're using the word arc flash, and there's some other things that we can get into, like labeling your equipment. So one of the things that we run into is people say, well, I've looked into OSHA, and OSHA doesn't say anything about labeling my equipment with an arc flash label. Well, it doesn't use the terminology arc flash label until November of last year.
Yeah.
And then they started using the terminology that the rest of us use. So yeah, I would agree. That came out in November, and I think most people in the industry applauded it. And I'm also curious, what have you heard? And by the way, I will reveal something that Jarod is on the NFPA 70E committee. So he has a lot of insight that some of us in the industry don't have. But I'm curious, what are you hearing about PPE that's on the horizon? Anything that jumps out to you on the PPE side?
Well, Steve, you brought up something, and yes, I do I've recently sit on the technical committee for NFPA 70E, but I have to be clear, I don't speak for NFPA
Oh,
70E.
yes.
That's something I have to be clear for, but I can give you my opinions, my thoughts.
Okay,
and
yeah,
we'll
so
go
we're not
from there.
asking for any
No.
secrets today.
Correct. um, but you're asking about what do we see on the horizon for PPE? And that question is very deep, I'll say.
Yes.
That question, if you go looking at PPE 2 decades ago, you're going back to the old school garments for the oil and gas industry.
That's right.
That, without naming brands or fabrics, we'll say there was some that were more uncomfortable than others.
Right.
In today's technologies, you're looking at what I'm wearing.
Right.
Full on PPE.
Right.
Right. You've
Right.
got different jeans, you've got shirts, you've got base layer technology, and we can hit on that later. But the advancements of protective apparel in today's world is night and day compared to what it used to be. And I
Absolutely.
absolutely see that continuing.
Yes. Yep. I see that technology. I remember when, it used to be all treated cotton, and I'm sure we can say that. It was just treated cotton.
Yeah.
And how companies that made arc flash PPE would do it is they just layer multiple layers of the same material to get that level of protection so they could rate it. And that's how people wore it. And then, so what happened is the workers always complained about it's hot, it's heavy, I can't see out of it. I mean, all the things that would cause them not to wear it.
Yep.
And so, what we've seen in the last 20 years is those companies manufacturing that PPE recognizing there's resistance to wearing this. And I think it's far greater than just the discomfort. I think that there was some unfortunate information that made its rounds years and years ago, and people have still gravitated to it. And I'll give you a great example. I've heard this so many times. I heard it in 1999 when I first got in this business. Oh, those suits are all well and good. All it means is that my wife has an open casket funeral versus a closed casket funeral.
I remember that.
And listen, how do you argue against that?
Right.
Because, well, the answer is now in 2018 at the IEEE conference, there was a white paper that was put forward, and that white paper gave us fantastic information. And as you know, because you've been in my training class before, I hit up on those. There's three major points that we found out. But one of the points that we found out is that we don't have any evidence of a fatality where somebody had their insides scrambled by the arc blast while they were wearing an arc flash suit. And so then I realized, well, wait a minute, that information is critical because now what we're doing is the message is pure. In the past, if I said, hey, Jarod, wear this arc flash suit, and you're like, oh, it's hot, it's heavy, I can't see out of it. And by the way, why would I wear it anyway? Because it just means that my wife has an open casket funeral versus a closed casket funeral. So then the answer is that's why most workers would just opt out
Right.
of the PPE. And so now what we see is the message is pure. Wear the PPE, we will keep your body from burning. And that white paper that came out in 2018, and I don't remember both authors, one of them was Lanny Floyd, but it was very interesting because I was sure, because of my background in the military, that you could have an arc blast scramble your insides. As a matter of fact, the first time I heard it, I ran with it. And then I realized later on, well, that kind of makes the message a little muddy. Wear this PPE, but you could still die. And so people say, well, why would I wear PPE? So yes, I think there's some advancements, not just in the PPE itself, but also in our understandings of its limitations. So
Yeah, and back to the original question of the advancements, and I think we've been touching on this before we go to the next topic. I think is really just the understanding that the hazards are real, and the awareness has to be there.
right, right.
It's not just electrical hazard. It's really diving in to the actual hazards of electrical arc flash, electrical shock,
right.
and arc blast. Once you understand that and have awareness, then you can understand where you need engineering controls. Then you can understand what you need as far as PPE, so
Right.
on and so forth.
Right.
So great conversation. Let's go for another one.
All right, before we go there, I do want to tell you one thing that I heard recently.
Okay.
Okay. I don't know how true it is, but I have heard that there is a movement in the technology on the electrical gloves. That there is a company, and I won't mention that company because we don't want to get in trouble with anybody, but we do know there is a company that is pursuing a new type of electrically rated glove. And by the way, I was just curious, so I went on Amazon. Oh my goodness. You talking about, man, don't go buy your PPE from Amazon without knowing specifically what you're buying, because they are showing gloves that are not electrically rated as an electrical safety glove. And I'm like, oh. So anyway, I think that that's on the horizon, is that we're going to see the technology increase and continue to increase. And we know that, and we'll have a whole nother discussion on electrically rated gloves. Probably the most bypassed PPE in our industry, and probably one of the most critical parts of the PPE ensemble in our industry. So, but I've heard that's coming. I don't know if you've heard that too, but I applaud that. I hope that we get away from the leather overprotectors and the requirements for testing every 6 months, electrical testing every 6 months. So,
Well, they're good. Yes, I've heard what you're talking about, and you're talking about the overprotectors. You're not talking about the testing for 6 months on the rubbers
right,
themselves, the
right,
voltage rated rubber gloves. That's the only thing between you and the voltage
right,
itself,
right,
right?
right,
So the overprotectors, that all stems from wanting, more dexterity with
right,
the gloves, but
right,
also having
right,
some of the arc rated fabric on the outside of those
right,
rubber gloves.
right.
And there's some liners that are arc rated out there today, so that's a whole nother
Oh,
topic. But absolutely, there's definite advancements and definite places you can go. But again, back to electrical shock, I think there's still so much unknown of the awareness within safety leaders today.
100%, 100%. And then we'll, coming back to what you and I heard at the IEEE this year, there was a speaker who made a statement, and Jarod and I were like, that's gold. And I'll just give it to you now. 74% of the electrical fatalities due to electric shock were unintended touching of electrical components. So that
Mm,
is huge.
yeah.
That means a guy changing out a pulley or a sprocket, not doing electrical work, he's doing mechanical work. So they're like, why should we lock out, tag out mechanical or electrical? We've got a mechanical hazard. Well, it depends how close proximity your elbow is to those energized conductors.